He was the least in his family, from the weakest clan in all of Israel, hiding in a winepress like a fugitive in his own land. Yet God looked at this frightened farmer and called him a mighty warrior. When enemy armies descended like locusts, stripping the land bare and leaving Israel starving and broken, one man's doubt became the unlikely foundation for an extraordinary faith. Armed with nothing but broken pottery, blazing torches, and 300 trembling men, he would shatter an empire. This is the story of Gideon, the reluctant hero who learned that God's strength is perfected in human weakness, and that victory belongs not to the mighty, but to those who dare to trust when everything screams retreat. The land of Israel had fallen into darkness once again. After 40 years of peace following Deborah's victory, the people forgot the God who had delivered them. Prosperity bred complacency, and complacency opened the door to idolatry. They erected altars to Baal, the Canaanite storm god who they believed controlled the rain. They bowed to Asherah poles, carved images of the fertility goddess who they thought blessed their crops and livestock. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God who had split the Red Sea and brought them into this promised land, was pushed to the margins of their lives, replaced by wooden idols and empty rituals. And so, God in his righteous judgment allowed them to experience the consequences of their choices. He permitted the Midianites, along with the Amalekites and other eastern peoples, to oppress Israel. For 7 years, this oppression grew worse and worse. Every harvest season became a nightmare. The Midianites would sweep into the valleys of Israel like a plague of locusts, so numerous that counting them was impossible. They came with their camels, an innovation that gave them speed and range that terrified the Israelites. They would camp in the land, destroy the crops, slaughter the livestock, and leave nothing for Israel to survive on. No sheep, no cattle, no donkeys. They stripped the land bare. The Bible says the Israelites were brought very low because of Midian. Families who once lived in houses now hid in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds, living like refugees in their own country. Farmers couldn't harvest their fields without enemy raiders descending to steal everything. Children went hungry. Fear became the constant companion of every Israelite. The once proud nation that had conquered this land under Joshua was now reduced to a starving, terrified people hiding in the hills. But even in judgment, God's mercy was present. When the Israelites finally cried out to the Lord because of Midian, God heard them. He sent a prophet to remind them why they were suffering. The prophet's message was clear and convicting. He reminded them that the Lord had brought them up out of Egypt, rescued them from slavery, driven out their enemies, and given them this land. And he had commanded them not to worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land they were living. But they had not listened. The suffering they experienced was the fruit of their disobedience. Yet even as the prophet delivered this message of judgment, God was preparing deliverance. In the village of Ophrah, in the territory of Manasseh, there lived a man named Joash from the Abiezrite clan. He had a son named Gideon. The Abiezrites were not a prominent family. In fact, they were considered the weakest clan in the entire tribe of Manasseh. And Gideon was the youngest in his father's house, the least significant member of an insignificant family. One day, Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress. Normally, wheat was threshed on a hilltop threshing floor where the wind could blow away the chaff. But Gideon was hiding in a winepress, a pit carved into rock, trying to process his family's grain in secret so the Midianites wouldn't see the dust and come to steal it. It was humiliating work for a grown man, crouching in a hole like a frightened animal, but this was what Israel had been reduced to. As Gideon worked in fear and frustration, suddenly the angel of the Lord appeared and sat down under the oak tree that was there. The angel looked at this frightened man hiding in a pit and spoke words that must have seemed absurd. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon looked up, sweat on his face, chaff in his hair, hands trembling from fear of Midianite raiders, and he heard himself called a mighty warrior. His response was immediate and bitter. "If the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say the Lord brought us up out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." It was an honest cry from a broken heart. Gideon had heard the stories of God's mighty acts, the plagues on Egypt, the parting of the Red Sea, the fall of Jericho. But those were stories from the past. Where was that God now? Why was Israel suffering if God was truly with them? Gideon's faith was buried under 7 years of trauma, fear, and hunger. But the angel didn't rebuke him. Instead, he gave him a commission that seemed impossible. Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? Gideon's response revealed his deep insecurity. How can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my family. Everything about his identity screamed inadequacy. He was from the wrong family, the wrong clan, the wrong position. He had no army, no weapons, no credentials. He was nobody. But God's answer cut through all of Gideon's excuses with one simple truth. I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive. It wasn't about Gideon's strength, his family's status, or his military experience. It was about God's presence and God's power. When God is with you, your weakness becomes irrelevant. But Gideon needed proof. His faith was fragile, wounded by years of oppression. So he asked for a sign. If I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that it is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you. The angel agreed to wait. Gideon rushed to prepare a young goat and bread made from a large amount of flour. He put the meat in a basket and the broth in a pot, brought them out, and presented them under the oak. The angel told him to place the meat and bread on a rock and pour out the broth. When Gideon did this, the angel touched the offering with the tip of his staff. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and bread, and the angel vanished from sight. Terror gripped Gideon. He realized he had been speaking with the angel of the Lord face to face, and in that culture, it was believed that seeing God meant death. But the Lord spoke peace to his fear. You will not die. So Gideon built an altar there and called it the Lord is Peace. That altar stood in Ophrah as a testimony for generations. That very night, God gave Gideon his first assignment, and it was dangerous. He was to tear down his father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. Then he was to build a proper altar to the Lord and sacrifice a bull using the wood from the Asherah pole. This was a direct assault on the idolatry that had brought Israel into bondage. And it would happen in his own family's property. Gideon took 10 of his servants and did exactly as the Lord commanded, but because he was afraid of his family and the townspeople, he did it at night instead of during the day. When the people woke up the next morning, they discovered that Baal's altar had been demolished and the Asherah pole cut down. Someone had built a new altar, and the sacrifice had already been offered on it. The people were outraged. They demanded to know who had done this sacrilegious act. When they learned it was Gideon, they came to Joash and demanded that he bring out his son to be killed. But Joash, perhaps inspired by what he'd witnessed, defended his son with brilliant logic. If Baal is really a god, let him defend himself when someone breaks down his altar. Why should we fight Baal's battles for him? From that day on, Gideon was called Jerubbaal, which means let Baal contend, because he had torn down Baal's altar. The confrontation with idolatry in his own family prepared Gideon for the larger battle ahead. Before he could defeat Israel's external enemies, he had to confront the internal enemy of false worship. Soon after, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples joined forces and crossed over the Jordan River. They camped in the valley of Jezreel, preparing for another season of plunder and oppression. But this time, something was different. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. Empowered by God's Spirit, he blew a trumpet, summoning the Abiezrites to follow him. He sent messengers throughout Manasseh, and throughout Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali, calling them to arms. 32,000 men responded and came to join him. But Gideon's faith, though growing, was still fragile. He needed more assurance. So he asked God for another sign, this time with a wool fleece. If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised, look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand. The next morning, Gideon rose early and squeezed the fleece, wringing out enough dew to fill a bowl with water, while all the ground around it was dry. But Gideon asked for one more sign, asking God not to be angry with him. This time, he requested that the fleece be dry and the ground covered with dew. God graciously granted this sign as well. The next morning, the fleece was dry, but the ground was covered with dew.
If you're finding Gideon's journey of faith compelling, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring more powerful biblical stories to life. Hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of faith, courage, and God's faithfulness.
With these confirmations, Gideon and all his troops set out early and camped at the spring of Harod. The Midianite camp was north of them in the valley near the hill of Mor. Gideon now had an army of 32,000 men. It wasn't nearly as large as the Midianite forces, which were described as thick as locusts, but it was something. But then God spoke to Gideon with shocking instructions. You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me saying our own strength has saved us. Tell the people that anyone who trembles with fear may turn back. Gideon must have been stunned. Too many men. They were already outnumbered. But he announced the option to leave, and 22,000 men turned around and went home. Only 10,000 remained. Gideon watched more than two-thirds of his army walk away, and he might have thought this was a disaster. But God wasn't finished. God spoke again. There are still too many men. Take them down to the water, and I will thin them out for you there. At the water, God gave Gideon specific instructions to separate those who lapped the water with their tongues like a dog from those who knelt down to drink. 300 men lapped with their hands to their mouths. All the rest knelt down to drink. God told Gideon that with the 300 men who lapped, he would save Israel and give the Midianites into his hands. All the other men were to go home. So Gideon kept only 300 men and sent all the others home. Each of the 300 received the supplies and trumpets of those who left. Now the situation was absurd. 300 men against an army so vast they couldn't be counted. The odds were impossible. Human logic said this was suicide. But that was exactly God's point. When victory came, no one would be able to say Israel won by their own strength, their military tactics, or their superior numbers. It would be undeniably clear that God alone had delivered them. That night, God spoke to Gideon with both an instruction and an encouragement. Get up, go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands. But if you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah and listen to what they are saying. Afterward, you will be encouraged to attack. God knew that Gideon was still afraid. Even after all the signs, all the confirmations, the presence of God's Spirit, Gideon was human and terrified. So God gave him one more encouragement. Gideon and Purah crept down to the outposts of the Midianite camp. The Midianites, Amalekites, and all the other eastern peoples were spread out in the valley like a swarm of locusts. Their camels could no more be counted than the sand on the seashore. As Gideon approached, he heard a man telling a dream to his friend. I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck the tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed. His friend responded with an interpretation that would have seemed humorous if it weren't so prophetic. This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon son of Joash, the Israelite. God has given the Midianites and the whole camp into his hands. Even the enemy knew that Gideon was coming and that their defeat was certain. God had already placed fear in their hearts. When Gideon heard the dream and its interpretation, he bowed in worship. Then he returned to the Israelite camp and called out, Get up. The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands. Gideon divided the 300 men into 3 companies. He placed trumpets and empty jars in the hands of all of them, with torches inside the jars. He instructed them, Watch me. Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do. When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then from all around the camp blow yours and shout, for the Lord and for Gideon. It was close to midnight when Gideon and the 100 men with him reached the edge of the Midianite camp. The guards had just been changed. Suddenly, Gideon's men blew their trumpets and broke the jars that were in their hands. All 3 companies blew their trumpets and smashed their jars. Grasping the torches in their left hands and the trumpets in their right hands, they shouted, A sword for the Lord and for Gideon. The 300 men surrounded the camp, each standing in his position. The chaos was immediate and complete. The entire Midianite army woke to the sound of trumpets blaring from all directions, the crash of breaking pottery, torches blazing in a circle around them. In the darkness and confusion, they assumed they were being attacked by a massive army from every side. The Lord caused the Midianites to turn on each other with their swords. The entire army fled in panic, running in every direction. The 300 Israelites held their positions and blew their trumpets while God caused the enemy to destroy themselves. As the Midianites fled toward Beth-shittah in the direction of Zererah, Gideon sent messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim, calling for reinforcements to cut off the enemy's escape routes. The Ephraimites came down and seized the waters of the Jordan as far as Beth-barah, cutting off the Midianite escape. They captured 2 Midianite leaders, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb at the winepress of Zeb. Then they pursued the Midianites and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon, who was now across the Jordan. The victory was complete and overwhelming. An army so vast it covered the valley like locusts had been routed by 300 men with torches, jars, and trumpets. Not because of clever military strategy or superior weapons, but because God fought for Israel. The glory belonged entirely to him. After this, Gideon pursued the remaining Midianite kings, Zebah and Zalmunna, who had escaped with 15,000 men, all that was left of the armies of the eastern peoples. 120,000 swordsmen had fallen in the battle. Gideon and his exhausted men crossed the Jordan and continued the pursuit. They eventually captured both kings and routed the entire army, completing the victory. When Gideon returned, the Israelites were so grateful and impressed that they came to him with a dangerous request. "Rule over us, you, your son and your grandson, because you have saved us from the hand of Midian." They wanted to make him king, to establish a dynasty. But Gideon gave them an answer that revealed his understanding of the truth. "I will not rule over you, nor will my son rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." Gideon recognized that he had been God's instrument, not the source of the victory. The glory belonged to God alone. To accept kingship would be to steal glory that wasn't his. However, Gideon did make one request. He asked each man to give him an earring from the plunder they had taken from the Midianites. The Midianites wore gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites. The people gladly agreed, spreading out a garment and each man throwing an earring from his share of the plunder onto it. The weight of the gold rings was over 40 pounds, not counting the ornaments, pendants, and purple garments worn by the kings of Midian or the chains that were on their camels' necks. Gideon made an ephod from this gold and placed it in his hometown of Ophrah. An ephod was a priestly garment, and Gideon's intentions may have been to create a memorial or place of worship to honor God. But tragically, all Israel prostituted themselves by worshiping it there, and it became a snare to Gideon and his family. The very gold taken from the defeated enemy became an idol that led Israel back into sin. Despite this tragic ending to his story, the immediate impact of Gideon's victory was peace. During Gideon's lifetime, the land had peace for 40 years. The Midianites were so thoroughly defeated that they never raided Israel again. Gideon, the frightened farmer who had hidden in a winepress, became Jerubbaal, the man who stood against idolatry, and the warrior through whom God delivered an entire nation. Gideon's story carries powerful truths that still speak to us across the millennia. God's call often comes to the least likely candidates. He chose the youngest son from the weakest clan in Manasseh to lead Israel. This pattern runs throughout Scripture. God chooses the small, the weak, the overlooked, and the insignificant by human standards to accomplish his purposes, so that his glory will be undeniable. Fear and doubt don't disqualify you from God's service. Gideon was afraid when he was called. He asked for multiple signs. He needed constant reassurance. Yet God patiently worked with him, providing confirmation after confirmation until Gideon's faith grew strong enough to lead. God doesn't demand perfect faith before he uses you. He meets you where you are and grows your faith through the journey. Victory comes through obedience, not superior strength. God deliberately reduced Gideon's army from 32,000 to 300. He wanted it to be absolutely clear that the victory was his work, not human achievement. When we trust God and obey His instructions, even when they seem counterintuitive, we position ourselves to see His power displayed in ways that leave no doubt about who deserves the glory. God fights for His people in ways that defy human logic. Trumpets, torches, and broken jars aren't military weapons. But in God's hands, they became instruments of complete victory. God's ways are not our ways. His strategies often seem foolish by human wisdom, but they accomplish purposes far beyond what conventional approaches could achieve. Spiritual victory must precede military victory. Before Gideon could defeat Israel's external enemies, he had to tear down the idols in his own family. Before we can experience breakthrough in our external circumstances, we often need to address the idols in our hearts, the things we've put in God's place, the false securities we've trusted more than Him. Even great victories don't guarantee continued faithfulness. Gideon's ephod became a snare, leading Israel back toward idolatry. Success can be dangerous. When God blesses us, when He gives us victory, we must guard our hearts against pride and against creating new idols from the blessings themselves. The very things God uses to deliver us can become stumbling blocks if we're not careful. The same God who called Gideon calls you today. He sees past your weaknesses, your fears, your inadequate resume. He looks at you and sees not what you are, but what you will become when His Spirit empowers you. The circumstances you face may seem overwhelming. The enemies arrayed against you, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, may seem as numerous as locusts. But the question is never about your strength or your resources. The question is always, is God with you? And if He is, then your weakness becomes the platform for His strength. Your small numbers become the context for His miraculous deliverance. Your fear becomes the starting point for a faith journey that will astound you. Like Gideon, you may be hiding in a winepress, living in fear, wondering where God is in your suffering. But God sees you. He knows your name. And He may be about to call you to something far greater than you've ever imagined. What part of Gideon's story speaks to you most? His fear? His need for signs? The way God reduced his army? The miraculous victory? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story impacted you, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs to hear about God's power to use the weak and fearful to accomplish the impossible. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss another powerful biblical story. Thank you for watching, and remember, God's strength is perfected in your weakness, and victory belongs not to the mighty, but to those who dare to trust Him. I'll see you in the next one.